Hey guys, Mrs. Traver here. We're going to work through section 1.4, factoring quadratics with a not equal to 1. And we're going to do two different methods. This first video we'll go through the British grouping method. So let's start with the first one. I have ourselves a quadratic and a is not equal to 1, and I can't factor anything out as a greatest common factor. Nothing goes into both, or I should say all three of the terms. So our method here is to first look at AC. So remember, we are in the setup ax squared plus bx plus c. And so I'm going to look at AC. So 7 times negative 3. So let's look at the number negative 21. Instead of finding factors of just c, now we're finding factors of AC. So we'll need to write a list out of all of our factors of negative 21. You can make a 21 by doing 1 and 21, or 3 and 7. And keeping in mind that because we're trying to multiply and get a negative, one of the two of these is negative. So either the first ones are negative, or you could have the other list of the second ones being negative. Once we've got our full list out, I'm looking for a combination of these that will equal or will sum to be negative 20. And it looks like I've got it right here. If I add those two up, it'll be negative 20. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these two numbers, 1x and negative 21x. And we're going to plug those in to the spot where negative 20x was. So I'm going to replace this term. So instead of negative 20x, now I have plus 1x minus 20x, and then drop down the rest. So I just replaced that term, and I made it two terms. So everything is still equal. And now what we're going to do is, this is where the grouping comes into play, is in the beginning I couldn't factor anything out to make a group. I couldn't find a GCF. But here I can find two GCFs of different pairs. So if I look at just the first two terms, I have a GCF of x. And if I look at the second two terms, I also have a GCF of 3 or negative 3. So we're going to look at these in two different pieces, and we're going to find the GCF of each separately. So the first one, like I said, there is an x in common, so I can pull that out. So let's see, x times what is 7x squared? I'd need a 7x still. And x times what is 1x? Just a 1. On the second piece, negative 20 and negative 3. Oops, look, I should have put 21. That was a typo on my part. Let me fix that. There should be a 21. All right, there we go, all better. Looking at 21x and negative 3, what's in common with both of those is a 3. I can pull a 3 out. Let's pull a negative 3 out. Whenever you can pull a negative out, do it. That way your inside that's left over ends up being positive. It looks a little nicer. All right, so if I pull a negative 3 out, negative 3 times what was negative 21x? Well, I needed a 7 and an x. And negative 3 times what is negative 3? Well, just 1. So negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Where I'm at now, I want to see what I have. So I have x of these 7x plus 1 things, minus 3 of these 7x plus 1 things. So I have a total of x minus 3 of these 7x plus 1 things. So notice this one, the British grouping method, in my opinion, is more intuitive. It looks like reverse foiling. So notice if I started at the bottom and I foiled, my next step after I did first outside, inside, last would look like this. And then I would have combined to get this. So the grouping step is what's extra, but this is more intuitive, this British grouping method, but it does take an extra step of doing that grouping. Let's work through another one. So let's do 5x squared plus 16x plus 3. And again, we're going to start off by looking at our factors of AC. So we're looking at factors of 15. And let's see what we have here. We've got 1 and 15. We've got 3 and 5. Let me pause this. All right, so we've got our factors, like I said, 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. Sorry for the pause there. We want to look for factors that add up to 16. It's definitely going to be these first ones. So this will be the combo I want. And I'm going to need a positive 1 and a positive 15. So let's use those guys in place of our 16x. So 5x squared plus 1x plus 15x plus 3. So notice again, this 16x was rewritten as a 1x plus 15x. And now let's look at some groupings. So I want to look at this group of the first two and this group of the second two. So this first one, 5x squared and 1x, the only thing in common is x to pull out. X times what is 5x squared? It's a 5x. And x times what is 1x? It's a 1. My next one, 15x and 3, I can pull a 3 out. 3 times what is 15x? It's 5x. And 3 times what is 3? It's 1. So I've got x of these 5x plus 1 things plus 3 more of these 5x plus 1 things. So I have a total of x plus 3 of these 5x plus 1 things. I'm saying it kind of strangely like that so you can recognize how I'm really factoring out the 5x plus 1. So there were 5x plus 1 x's and there were 5x plus 1 3's. So I had 5x plus 1's plus 1 of these x plus 3's. So however you want to think of it like that is fine. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is at this step, I grabbed 1 and 15 and I put them in this order in order to then group. So notice if I had flip-flopped them, I would have had 15x here and 1x here, and then the groups would have been different and the factors would have been different. But I want to show you really quickly that does work out. So I've rewritten it here, and again, I just flip-flopped these. So this one was 1x plus 15x. This one is 15x plus 1x. And notice my grouping is different. So these first two terms, I could pull out a 5x. My second two terms, there's nothing in common with 1x and 3. When there's nothing in common, you just pull out a 1. And then you leave what's on the inside on the inside. And then notice we're in the same situation as we were before. I have 5x plus 1 and x plus 3, which is the same answer I had a moment ago. So it doesn't matter what order you put them. There's my two examples for British method. Like I said, this method, if we want to kind of classify it in the pros column, it is intuitive. And it's kind of like reverse FOIL. In the cons column, you have to use grouping. So you have to be careful that you understand what that means in doing this pulling out business. And it's an extra step. So there's like, I guess, 1, 2, 3 things we're doing. So it's a little bit longer compared to the next type I'm going to show you, which is the Lizzie method. So go ahead and watch that video next if you'd like to see the Lizzie method.